Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I am Lanisha Lightbourne, the Business Development Manager for Asset Management and High Net Worth Services at the Bermuda Business Development Agency, also known as the BDA. The BDA is an independent public and private partnership, and our focus is on promoting the jurisdiction and encouraging economic development and inward direct investment. We have teamed up with AIMA for a three-part series of Lunch and Learn webinars. Today, we bring together some of the jurisdiction's experts to discuss the ongoing development and offering of Bermuda's investment fund industry. Thank you again for joining us today, and I will hand it over to Laura.
Thanks, Lanisha, and a huge thank you to the BDA and AIMA for cooperative efforts in creating this series of 3 Thursday lunchtime events focused on alternative assets in Bermuda. As all of us following AIMA and the BDA on LinkedIn will know, both groups have been incredibly active in engaging membership over the past few no-travel months. Our goal today is to share a framework of the funds and private equity business in Bermuda and to give you a reason to contact us the next time your clients are creating an investment structure. I'm excited to start today's discussion. As background, I'm a chartered accountant with 15 years of Cayman and Bermuda experience. I work at Wakefield Quinn, a 50-person law firm and corporate services group. My current role is primarily as head of director services to accept non-executive director appointments on investment entities with considerable involvement in our corporate service provider business, and particularly working on economic substance and common reporting standards. Our 2 panelists today have many years of Bermuda expertise. We'll start with Sharon Beasley, partner and chief executive officer, head of corporate, Beesmont Law, and move to Scott Burns, CPA, senior vice president, Horseshoe Private Equity, part of the Horseshoe Group. Sharon, can you share more about background and what Beesmont does in Bermuda?
Laura, thank you for that introduction. So as you mentioned, I'm the senior partner of Beesmont Law Limited, based in Bermuda. We're a law firm that provides corporate, commercial, litigation, and property advice. I started my professional career with the international law firm Linklaters, and I've worked in London, Hong Kong, and South Africa. Over the past 28 years in Bermuda, I practice in all areas of corporate and commercial law, but now have a niche practice in investment fund work. I work particularly with fund managers and fund administrators. I'm also a director of the Bermuda Monetary Authority and an Irish Stock Exchange listed China fund and a few other smaller funds.
Thank you, Sharon. How about you, Scott?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So I'm Scott Burns, head of the private equity group for Horseshoe Fund Services. Horseshoe provides outsourced fund administration solutions for private equity funds, hedge funds, and ILS funds. I have been in the private equity funds world for about 25 years. 17 years of that was with JP Morgan Private Equity Fund Services, heading up their Bermuda office, and the last 8 years with Horseshoe. So I've been in the fund services world for 25 years, which has given me a pretty good front row seat to the tremendous success of Bermuda in the funds industry. And I'm really excited to be part of the panel today.
Thank you. Sharon, what are some qualities of the Bermuda funds and alternative assets environment which clients find attractive and which have allowed us to succeed over several decades?
I think that the Bermuda qualities, which are important to potential fund clients beyond speed to market, costs, and the fact that Bermuda has ultimate appeal to the Privy Council as a common law jurisdiction. I found that the important factors are that Bermuda is a sophisticated global financial center with professionals able to support the range of the financial sector, which includes insurance, reinsurance, ILS, private equity, hedge funds, venture capital, infrastructure funds, and more recently, digital asset business. Bermuda has a strong reputation as a substantive jurisdiction, which is reflected in the fact that Bermuda has maintained its EU Solvency II equivalency. And more recently, it was recognized by the NAIC in the US as having reciprocal jurisdiction status. This places Bermuda's reinsurance industry on an equal footing with the benefits provided and secured by the EU reinsurers under the US-EU covered agreement. But I particularly want to pay emphasis on this factor, which is important to clients. That Bermuda is now recognized as being a globally transparent and cooperative tax jurisdiction, with the result that it is on the EU's white list, and its mutual evaluation report issued by the OECD FATF confirmed that Bermuda has a high level of AML ATF effectiveness with respect to assessing risks and applying a risk-based approach. Bermuda has, of course, also implemented the US FATCA and the OECD CRS and CBC reporting information with every country that belongs to the OECD convention.
Scott, what are a few features that clients really appreciate here?
Yeah, I'd say Bermuda's got a really robust alternative funds infrastructure. And I think that really positions it well, especially as a top jurisdiction of choice for fund managers and structures that place more of a high value versus a high volume. So in other words, the high value end of the alternative funds world. And so while, I mean, certain segments of the alternative funds world were forced for cost reasons or other factors to more of probably a commoditization of the fund setup and servicing, I think Bermuda is a much better fit for those fund managers who kind of value the high touch, high service end solutions. And I think two great examples are the ILS industry and the private equity space here in Bermuda. I think they require, you know, more of a high touch. They're not as standard and require a little bit more experienced staff. And so not only are they a little more complex, but they have these higher investor requirements and expectations around reporting and governance. I mean, these institutional investors demand not only really robust reporting and really transparent reporting, but it needs to be done in a really controls-focused environment. And I think to meet this high bar, a jurisdiction has to have two things. One is a really strong network of experienced, qualified staff, and also just as important, a regulatory environment that both understands the industry but has a really strong global relationship. Listen, I think Bermuda ticks all the boxes.
Sharon, from a legal practitioner's perspective, after the company or partnership is formed by a licensed corporate service provider, can you give us a short outline of fund structures in Bermuda?
So Bermuda is competitive when it comes to the cost of establishing and operating an investment fund. But what I wanted to emphasize is that it also offers flexibility and a range of structures that can assist asset managers with meeting their particular goals. So this range includes a mutual fund company, which is exempted from the usual maintenance of share capital restrictions that apply to an ordinary corporate vehicle, to facilitate its use as a pooled investment vehicle. A limited partnership can also elect to have legal personality. We have LLCs, which follow the Delaware model, and segregated account companies. And more recently, Bermuda has introduced an incorporated SAC, and not least, unit trusts. Hence, Bermuda is able to facilitate any type of investment fund structure, be it hedge fund, infrastructure fund, private equity, ILS, etc. All investment funds are subject to the prudential regulation of the Bermuda Monetary Authority pursuant to the Investment Funds Act 2006, as amended. And the extent of that oversight will depend on whether they're authorized, which covers institutional, i.e. accredited high net worth investors, administered, which are listed funds essentially, and standard, i.e. retail funds. But Bermuda also allows for special fund jurisdictions such as Japan. The other main category is registered, which covers private, professional funds, that's A and B categories depending on the nature of the licensing and the assets under administration of the manager, and professional closed funds. An authorized fund provides investors with enhanced yet efficient supervision. Open-ended professional funds are either Class A or Class B. In both cases, reporting requirements are met by filing an annual certification with the Bermuda Monetary Authority. The qualification differs as between the two classes based on the nature of the investment manager. So to give a little bit of information on that, professional Class A funds must appoint an investment manager for the fund who is either licensed under the Investment Business Act 2003, authorized or licensed by a foreign regulator recognized by the BMA, or carrying on business in or from Bermuda or in a jurisdiction which is recognized by the Bermuda Monetary Authority, being a person who has gross assets under management of not less than 100 million, or is a member of an investment management group that has consolidated assets of not less than 100 million. Closed-ended funds are also now regulated by the Bermuda Monetary Authority, and they'll be either private, i.e. less than 20 investors and no intention to make a public offering, or professional closed funds. For any type of publicly offered fund, I did want to mention that a listing on the Bermuda Stock Exchange may be of interest, as the BSX is a fully electronic exchange, internationally recognized, and also the leading exchange for ILS listings. The BXX has additionally launched what's called an ESG, Environmental, Social and Governance Initiative, to empower sustainable and responsible growth for its member companies, listings, and the wider community. Insurance-linked securities are acknowledged as sustainable development investments. I understand that Greg Wojciechowski in one of the panels will have talked more on the advantages of an ILS listing on the Bermuda Stock Exchange.
Scott, you have indicated that Bermuda ticks all of the boxes as a jurisdiction well positioned for selective fund managers. Are there particular characteristics of the market here that differentiate Bermuda from other funds jurisdictions?
Yeah, I think so. But first of all, Laura, thank you very much for not giving me the question that you gave Sharon. I appreciate that. So no, it's a really good question, and I think one of the keys to Bermuda's maybe value proposition is really big business advantage that we offer is the access to a really deep pool of investor capital. So some of the same factors that mentioned earlier that make Bermuda a great choice for fund managers and entities have also attracted a wide variety of companies that are sought after investors into the private equity and ILS funds. And I think the competition to raise capital for alternative funds has never really been more challenging. I mean, it takes about a year and a half now to raise one of the fund ones in the private equity fund group. And the fund managers spend a significant amount of time and resources crisscrossing the globe to pitch these potential investors. And I think Bermuda offers a really valuable access to investors from several segments of the alternative space, including insurance companies, pension funds, family offices, and even wealth management firms. And I think because Bermuda is a short flight from the East Coast, that these managers can meet with a lot of potential clients located in a 1 mile stretch right through the middle of Hamilton really easily and efficiently. And I think since they already spend significant time in Bermuda, they have these long-lasting relationships in Bermuda, they're really naturally more receptive to investments and investing in Bermuda. I think the combination of this easy access to investor capital, really high comfort level with Bermuda, really positions it well to help these fund management with what I think one of the toughest things they do, and that's raise money. I think that's a great value add for Bermuda.
Thank you, Scott. And I know we're pretty short on time today because there is a lot to talk about in 30 minutes. But just on the point you made regarding so many kind of stakeholders are within a mile, that's just a little note for anybody who is interested in starting a new structure that the BDA's concierge service is complimentary, and when the airports are available to everybody, it's something worth contacting the BDA about, where they will introduce interested parties to sort of bankers, the BDA, the minister, service providers, and you can do it all really from New York. It's essentially a one-day trip. So perhaps more on that later. But for now, Sharon, back to you. Can you tell us maybe one or two features that your clients really appreciate in the Bermuda structuring?
Well, I'm sure different lawyers have different factors that they are able to put forward as benefits in Bermuda. But from my experience, I found that the private fund is attractive because it enables smaller fund managers to develop a track record. And at the point when a decision is to be made to expand the fund, it enables a manager to better determine whether an authorized or a professional fund would fit its mandate and investor needs. The private fund can be both closed-ended or open-ended, and although an offering document is required, its format is more flexible. The other aspect that I wanted to mention was the new Incorporated Segregated Accounts Company Act 2019. This allows for the creation of segregated accounts with separate legal status. This allows both open and closed-ended strategies to be housed in the same vehicle, benefiting from synergies and costs and operational efficiencies, while enjoying statutory ring fencing, i.e. assets of individual cells are not available to the creditors of any other cell. Given the separate legal personality, separate accounts of an ISAC may also appoint different boards of directors if that's of interest. Both SACs and ISAC structures can be useful for master feeder fund structures. One of, in particular, a feature in Bermuda is that one account can invest into another account within the same structure, and for family office structures. I also wanted to add that given the depth of professional expertise in Bermuda, sourcing directors resident here provides a wide talent pool for fund boards.
And on that, sorry, I keep hacking on to the panelists, but on that point, Sharon, that's something that many of our clients have felt that's a huge advantage in terms of dealing with economic substance, obviously not for funds, but for other investment or other structures in Bermuda. It's been a huge asset. Over to Scott. Scott, I don't want to ask too much about Horseshoe's secret sauce, but considering a trend for fund administration firms in Bermuda and the Cayman Islands to outsource parts of their work process to lower cost jurisdictions, why has Horseshoe continued to invest in its Bermuda presence? What sort of local resources did your firm's founders use? And what do you see as a strength for the long term in Bermuda's funds, private equity, and ILS industries?
Yes, I was scribbling down Sharon's answer to the last question. I had that same question for a potential client a couple of days ago, and once again, should have had Sharon or one of our high knowledge lawyers on the horn with me. So I think this question is kind of a natural follow-on from a couple of topics that we touched on earlier around Bermuda's focus more on the kind of high quality versus the high quantity end of the value chain. I mean, there's several reasons why Horseshoe continues to place a very high value on its Bermuda presence. I think first, tremendous access to a really deep pool of experienced staff is just absolutely key for us and our clients. I mean, we think our clients receive a tremendous value by having access to not only service teams, but a leadership team, which in a lot of cases has decades of experience in these really specialized fields. And you really can't find the scale of talent across other jurisdictions like you can in Bermuda. And I think second, Bermuda has been forming this robust service provider infrastructure for a long time. I mean, I know we have long-term relationships with Bermuda-based service provider staff that go back decades. I mean, we've shared common clients, we've collaborated on industry solutions and products, and I think really importantly, worked hand in hand with the regulators. I think this type of service provider infrastructure gives a significant value to our clients and their investors. And kind of third, I think being associated with a top tier jurisdiction like Bermuda really contributes to what we have as a really strong brand and I think really appreciated by clients, potential clients, and our investors. I mean, we believe Bermuda is perfectly positioned to continue to be a leader in the alternative investment space, and great for fund managers, especially, we think, especially for fund managers that place a really high premium on reputation, governance, and expertise.
Thank you, Scott. Sharon, back to you. Having been a part of Bermuda's legal and funds community for quite a number of years, what are some areas where you think we've made great advances, and what are some areas that you're working further to develop?
That's a good question. As I noted earlier, I believe that Bermuda has demonstrated a strong commitment to ensuring that the jurisdiction is a global leader in the efforts to combat money laundering and financing of terrorism, and is recognized as a transparent and cooperative tax jurisdiction. Bermuda has in many ways, due to its sophisticated regulator, the BMA, demonstrated leadership in the regulation of all different types of investment fund structures by taking a risk-based approach, which has enabled Bermuda to be innovative in its approach to different structures. By way of example, ILS and ISACs. In terms of the areas we need to work on, I think that Bermuda has to continue to be alert to the impact of international initiatives and to ensure that it does not delay in responding to them. But our track record over the last few years has been positive in this respect, though Bermuda must continue to strive to meet the needs of the global offshore infrastructure investment market.
To both of you, I wanted to touch on current events in the last few minutes of our discussion before we answer a couple of questions. If any of our listeners have looked around the BDA's website, which is bda.bm, or if you've seen a couple of our marketing videos, Happy and Business as Usual, you will see that we're still enjoying quite a high quality of life here in Bermuda, despite the fact that we're not traveling overseas at the moment. It is business as usual, although certainly we're having many more meetings on Zoom and elsewhere virtually. First to Sharon and Scott, then to you. What is a quick summary of discussions that you're having with your clients regarding COVID-19? And when do you think we'll reach some form of a new normal?
To me?
Sorry, first to you, Sharon, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Our fund clients have continued to operate without much disruption so far, holding board meetings electronically bar the occasional disruption, mainly due to the fact that investment managers and administrators have been able to seamlessly adapt to remote working. And I think that Scott may have something to say on that. We have also not experienced any difference in the responsiveness of either the Bermuda Monetary Authority or other service providers in Bermuda.
Scott, what are your clients telling you about how they've handled COVID-19, and where are things going from now, do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So I think probably across the globe, our clients had a universal #1 top priority, and that was the immediate actions to safeguard their staff. And then I think from my conversation over the last couple of weeks, I kind of think there's maybe a couple common themes. First, our private equity clients in particular, it was a really big effort to kind of really quickly, completely, and thoroughly analyze all their portfolio companies and come up with action plans and put those action plans into operation to kind of reflect the new risks and environment they're working in. Maybe more from an operational standpoint, the traditional metrics and methods to use to value these private equity investments have really been challenged in this environment, and a significant amount of more work was required to really do a deep dive into the valuations of those portfolio companies in this new environment. And I'm sure that's going to impact the next several quarters to come. But I think kind of the good news is the feedback from most of our clients was, I think, overwhelmingly positive. I mean, from the standpoint of how they've been able to adapt. Maybe one issue that has come up a couple times is they're still struggling to replace the value of a physical meeting, and areas of portfolio administration, due diligence, and investor due diligence. They're still trying to figure out what those solutions are going to look like. So I think the best we can do is kind of make an adjustment, all the adjustments you have to kind of do best you can in the new normal and keep out adding value. And I think solving these unique client problems which have come up. And listen, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think the good news is we've been successfully transitioned to this work at home environment and really able to meet and I think in a lot of cases exceed the client deliverables and expectations. And hey, all that aside, we are definitely looking forward to greener pastures later this year.
Thank you, Sharon and Scott, for all of your insight. And I know that audience members are going to be really interested in maybe following up with all of us on some points that we've shared today in a very short time. I'd like to pass it back to Lanisha. Lanisha, I know that there are a few questions of people interested to learn more. We're ready.
Oh, fantastic. That was awesome. I do have a few questions. I believe this first one should go to Sharon. The question is, our firm has U.S. counsel who uses Cayman to incorporate offshore vehicles. Is there any reason that this can't be done in Bermuda?
Well, not only is it possible, but several of the larger Cayman law firms now have a strong presence in Bermuda. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned earlier, Bermuda does have a wide range of investment vehicles available, so there is no difficulty as far as I'm concerned. I think Laura did mention about the BDA's concierge service. So if any more information is wanted, I recommend that you look at the BDA email for this with the webinar registration to provide that information about introductions to all necessary setup service providers.
Absolutely, thank you. Laura, I think this one would be great for you. Do directors of Bermuda entities need to live in Bermuda?
The short answer is no, they don't. Directors could live anywhere, but the slightly more, I guess the more practical answer is it's actually a great idea to have local directors because funds are outside of scope for the economic substance regime, but for many other finance companies or insurance companies, other things like that, it's really helpful to demonstrate that strategic decision-making does happen in Bermuda. And from a fund's point of view, although it's not necessary, it makes a lot of sense to have directors in Bermuda. It actually saves managers a bit of money because often if you're asking questions that sometimes it's more of a legal question, but because we're resident in Bermuda and the BDA is literally 2 doors down from my office, we have a really good relationship with them. And as Scott and Sharon and Lanisha, I know will all reflect, because we're quite a tight-knit group of stakeholders here in Bermuda, there's a ton of correspondence and kind of collaborative efforts that go on between industry service providers and managers and so on. So it's really helpful to have somebody who has some knowledge that they're able to share. It saves you money because then you don't have to pay someone else to tell you that when the directors already know. So long story short, no, it's not required, but for funds, it's a really good idea.
Thank you so much, Laura. Scott, I think I'm going to give this one to you, and it's definitely a passion of mine personally. Is the setup of family offices regulated in Bermuda?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And I'm going to hedge slightly by saying that probably depends on some factors. But one thing I will say is I think for a lot of the things we touched on earlier today, Bermuda is a fantastic environment for family offices, has a big family office network. And I think there's even legislation which potentially coming down the pike to even enhance that as a value add for the jurisdiction. So, you know, maybe a deeper answer from one of our Sharon or one of our deep legal minds in Bermuda. But I think that to summarize, it depends. But I think just an absolute great opportunity for Bermuda to add value to that particular segment of the alternative space.
Thank you, Scott. And you are correct. There is legislation coming down the pipeline this summer. So it's definitely a space to watch in Bermuda. At this time, I would like to thank everyone for an informative and insightful discussion today, particularly to our panelists, Scott and Sharon, and of course, Laura. For those of you interested in keeping up to date with the developments in the Bermuda market, I encourage you to visit www.bda.bm, follow us, and make sure to sign up for our newsletter, The Bermuda Angle. And please do not hesitate to contact myself if you have any questions or follow-up questions from today's webinar. Next week, we have another phase 2 in our webinar series, and we're really excited to continue this partnership with AIMA Bermuda and AIMA International. Thank you all.
Thanks.